I just wanted to ask you guys a question. How did you enjoy summer yesterday? And now we broke the winter coat back out and get back to regular South Dakota weather. But how many of you really have seen some maybe delays in need for weed control this year? Kind of a significant deal with the weather patterns the way they've been. Kind of slow emergence of everything, and even including weeds this year. So some of those treatments probably are a little bit off sync of what we normally would like to see. I would want to remind you from the handout that Daryl's sending around there that it is important to remember, give some priorities to the different weeds that you might have out there. Timeliness is everything, and if you go to that second page on that handout, there is some studies that SDSU did as far as competition is concerned. You've got one, if left on control, for example, if you have 10 wild oat plants or 10 wild mustard plants per square foot, they estimated that's about a 35% reduction in your potential for yield. So if we aren't getting those particular weeds under control immediately or as soon as possible, and this year's maybe more critical because with, again, the sync of applying that herbicide out there may not be like we'd want it to. It's going to be more critical to make sure that you do get those treatments made in a timely manner. It's definitely, you can see also one thing I'd really like to point out, and this is kind of maybe a little sidetrack issue here, but that research on Canada thistle, if they had a patch of Canada thistle, and I'm not sure how big a patch is, so you can use your imagination, but you know how thick that Canada thistle can be and how quick it can establish. We're talking about 60% reduction in some of those areas. So we really have to target and give priority to what weeds are out there. So that means we have to get out, scout, or at least maybe hire a consultant to get out there and scout for us, take that time in order to understand those problems that are emerging in our fields. One of the other things, just to stress as far as weed is concerned, make sure you do use good IPM practices, integrated pest management practices. You heard it alluded to. Otta said it a little bit ago with the bugs. Do we really have a problem in those fields? Are we really identifying what's out there and addressing that problem so we are actually spending our money where it really needs to be spent? Also, weed-free seed is critical for that IPM to work. And one other thing that's really critical is something I think Dwayne does well out here at the farm: sanitation and rotation, keeping those weeds kind of off balance with different crops and different rotations, different ways of managing. If you walk through this field, you find very little weed pressure, and that's kind of for a weed guy, that's kind of a frustration because it's just something you can't pick up. And you see a little pressure on the edges of the road, but that would be expected considering the setting. But definitely is one of those things that you can see the benefits of that sanitation and rotation programs that he works on out here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the IPM. I think it's pretty well been discussed from year to year. If we got questions on particular problems within wheat settings, we sure can discuss that at the end. I've just got a couple things that I'd really like to add to the discussion. How many of you are running into some concerns as far as the resistant issue within your farm or within your clients' farms? I think we're seeing more and more of that concern start to spring up across the state. We're in a particular important part of the state as far as that resistance issue when it comes to kochia. Kind of a corridor from 281 west out here to the Missouri River is kind of popped up as far as kochia resistance. And you're seeing quite a bit of those resistant issues in the north central part of the state. There's some around here in Gettysburg. Are they all resistant? Do we have absolutely 100% confirmation? We don't know. We can test for it. We have a protocol through the weed extension program at SDSU if you do have a suspect weed, you can get a hold of myself, you can get a hold of Daryl at campus. We'll get the protocol as far as collecting the seed or collecting the plants, and we'll go through and do some spraying of some different rates of Roundup, particularly, I guess, would be the one we're going to work with. And we will have a check with it so we can kind of compare it. We know with our check that is not resistant to kochia, so we'll have a good comparison and see what might be out in the field. But that said, just that knowledge of it isn't the end. And so management's going to have to come into play as far as, using rotations. Corn in a setting where we might have some resistance is a really good crop to help maybe lessen some of those problems, because we have far more chemistries to work with. If we're getting into bean rotations or following with beans, then those options kind of narrow down. We don't have near the chemistries out there that we'd like to have. There are plenty of potentials down the road, but they're just not here yet for herbicides. So right now is a critical time to manage that resistance issue. We have to take after it. Again, rotations, sanitation is a good thing. I'm not going to mention tillage, but that is an option. And it is definitely something that we've got to look at as far as how we can manage that particular problem. So there is some additional information as you in that handout I gave you. It's in black and white. We're poor up in Aberdeen. We can't afford the color copies like Daryl can on campus. He does have colored handouts of that same particular handout you got there. If you do want a colored copy, it's up at the shop. One last thing, and then I'll turn it back to Bob. I don't know if it's going to be a concern this year, but we do have some pre-harvest aid information. We've got a handout again up on the table in the shop concerning if we're maybe going to have some weed flushes that we need to get rid of before we harvest, or maybe we need to dry that crop down ahead of time so we can get it cut. I mean, we're not sure what might be with the way the weather's been. It's always a possibility. Just remember that there are some restrictions as far as when you do that, as far as your product you're using and the days that you need to wait before you can harvest. Plus, if you get into a situation where you might be producing seed wheat, there are some issues there as far as when you make that application. The recommended time is about 35% head moisture or seed moisture when it's still in the head. If we try to do that earlier, it has a significant impact on the viability of those seeds. So make sure that you do kind of understand that setting you're getting into if you do consider a pre-harvest treatment of herbicide.